All right. Hello, good evening. I hope you can hear me, and I'm going to check in and make sure if somebody is here, they can hear me and see me. Actually, I'm going to go on my own computer and see if I can hear myself so I don't keep talking like I did yesterday and there was no sound. I did test it this evening, but I just don't trust technology. So I want to make sure that y'all can hear me and see me, and I don't see anybody shown up yet. So I'm going to give it just a second. Here we are. Okay. Oh boy. I hope this is working. If this is not working again, then we've got a problem. Then we've got a problem. Okay. Okay, Sarah is here and she can see me and hear me. That is huge. Okay, good. I really want this to work. So thank you for bearing with me through figuring out this technology. It's definitely not my thing. So welcome to day 2 of Back to School Parenting Boot Camp. I'm Melissa Benaroya, and I am your coach and supporter through this process. I wanted to check in with everybody, and I know people will be jumping in and out. Hi, Trisha. So glad you're here. Sorry, I have a screen to my right, and I'm talking to you in front of me. I want to check in with you a little bit first about self-care, because that was our topic yesterday, and hopefully y'all had an opportunity to practice today and apply some of the things that you came up with for yourself. So would love to hear if you had an opportunity to try that. But I did want to spend most of this evening talking about using empathy to stay calm and connect. And I actually printed out some of the things everybody had posted and wanted to respond. And I'm glad you're here, Sarah, because you and I had talked about a particular response, and I want to make sure that I answer any of our questions. So since I just have a few of you here, what did you do for self-care today? Go ahead and just type in the box. A, did it. B, didn't do it. And if you did do it, what did you do? I'd love to hear. I do want to acknowledge that for many of you, going to bed early was on your list of self-care items. And that is definitely one of mine. So I'm not going to stay here all night. We're going to probably be together for about 15, 20 minutes. I actually have a terrible head cold, so I have to get in bed. My self-care really is important at this moment. So I don't want to keep anybody here too long. And I know a lot of people are planning to jump in later and watch this. So hopefully we can have a little bit of a dialogue. Okay, Trisha's still drinking her water. Hopefully you're drinking it right now, Trisha. I'm with you. All right. And Sarah, how did it go today? I'm interested to hear if you had an opportunity to do any self-care. Trisha's drinking her water. I'll just wait because there's a little bit of a delay here. So as you're jumping in, I would love to have everybody share kind of what they tried today as we talk about it. I did it. Oh, good. I can't see what it is you wrote. I did a list of 3 items that I did well today and posted on Facebook. I got some really inspiring messages from my friends as a result. Awesome. So psyched to hear that. Thank you for sharing that. So today we talked about using empathy as a parenting tool. And most people don't think about empathy as a parenting tool, but I think it's probably one of the most powerful parenting tools there is. And as you can see, we have parents that have kids of all ages in this boot camp, from 1 to like 17 years old. And many of you had 20-something-year-olds, but I think you're probably focused on the teens that are probably still home with you. And I think some of the challenge here was finding something that worked for you or worked for that child. So your empathy is going to sound different in different scenarios and with different children. And in this practice, I suggested just picking one empathetic statement just so that you have something accessible to you in the moment. I know I typed out a bunch of people were giving ideas about how do I remember to say this. And one of the ways to remember is don't feel like you have to make something up on the fly. Just have something ready. If you have your go-to line, it's going to be easier to access in that moment. So I acknowledge that it's not going to work for all of your kids, and maybe you just pick one of your kids and one line to work on to start with, just to get into the habit of it. So I really want to just keep things simple. We don't have a lot of time in this boot camp, so I wanted you to just pick one tiny thing to practice and play with. And like I said in our dialogue, this is just an opportunity to experiment and notice how we're showing up, how we're responding, and what our children's response is to us. So I just want you to play with this. I want to respond to some of the things that that were written today. Susan said she's going to use "it's so hard" for a situation that's coming up this week. I think she has a preteen, and Trisha's saying she's thinking of "oh man, it's hard." I love "oh man, it's hard." It's hard applies to a lot, and I think is age appropriate for most kids. And actually I use this all the time with adults as well. And, to be quite honest, most of us are pretty empathetic to other adults because we can relate to their struggles and their emotions. It's a little bit harder to relate to our kids when they're frustrated that we didn't buy them another candy bar, right? So, but it is their true emotion. They are still struggling with it. So I just want to acknowledge that it's much easier to be empathetic to things that we can relate to, a little bit more challenging when it doesn't make a lot of sense to us. And a lot of our children's behavior is not going to make sense to us. So I love that you picked "oh man, it's hard." And I can't remember, Trisha, how old your kiddos are, but I think it applies to all kiddos. So Susan was going to try "it's so hard" as well. She had asked any thoughts on what to say to a sister when she's seething because brother waits till the last minute to organize his stuff, and then we get a late start to school when she wishes she wishes we did. I do try to help her brother with his organizational skills, but he never fails to throw me a curveball as we're headed for the car. Does this work for sister? It's hard when you want to leave promptly and brother's running late. So absolutely, if she's frustrated and starting to throw a fit, then absolutely, I think it's totally appropriate. There's probably a handful of other responses too in this scenario, ways to respond to brother. There's opportunities probably for some natural or logical consequences. We're not talking about that today, but I do think that we can empathize with her with how hard it is. And acknowledging that usually after empathy, something else comes first. But the empathy is key because it allows that child to feel heard and seen, and then they'll be more willing to hear what's coming next. And usually something does come next. It's not always just like, oh, it's so hard, and we move on. Sometimes it is. Sometimes like, it's hard to leave the park and we got to go home now and make dinner, right? So it can be that simple, but usually something will follow. But that thing that's going to follow, that thing that you're going to say or do is not going to be as effective if you don't start with empathy first. Because positive discipline, which I'm trained in positive discipline, says you must connect before you correct or you redirect. So that connection piece is key. So totally applicable. Now, Sarah, I have what you wrote here, but I'm going to respond. Is there a point when kids generally start to make more sense? My kids totally battle me. Yes. They do become much more rational beings, but it's still challenging. They're always going to be challenging. I think when they're really young, there's a lot of task-oriented, physical challenging aspects of parenting. As they get older, it just gets more complex. I think this just never gets easy. I mean, this is what I talk about all day long in my private practice and the classes that I teach. And I still am working so hard at all of these tools and strategies and working so hard on building my relationship with my kids. I think one thing that makes it easier is understanding what is driving our children's behavior, because all behavior is purposeful. There is a drive that drives our kids to do and say what they're doing. And I think it's most powerful when we put on our detective hat and start with what's going on, what's up. Because many times, and I think this came up in this scenario, like you want to react to what the child did, but there's a reason the child did what they did. And we're not going to be able to fix it, meet that need, whatever it is, if we don't get underneath the behavior that we're seeing on the surface. So a little bit of a tangent there. But yes, my kids' behavior still continues to baffle me, and they're 13 and 11. But I do think they do become much more rational beings. So I do want to share, Sarah, what you had written, because somebody else responded as well, I think, if I printed this out correctly. Sarah said, I'm really having a hard time thinking of a phrase. My biggest problem staying calm is when my kids are genuinely mean to each other or to me, and I can't find any valid reason for it. So if my 8-year-old just walks up to the 4-year-old and whacks him for no apparent reason, I can't just say, it's so hard to be decent and a human being and treat others with respect. I can totally relate to that. Anybody have a suggestion what to say in that situation like that? Usually I totally overreact because I'm horrified that I've apparently somehow raised a child who seems to have no regard for other people's feelings. So what I would say to that is this is the perfect opportunity to notice there is a reason your child has chosen to do this to their younger sibling. And usually it's attention. This is a negative attention. It draws you in immediately. It's getting negative attention, but it's still your attention. That's what our children crave. They want 150% of your time and energy. So there may be something going on there. So I think starting off with empathy and even saying like uh-oh, what happened? Like kind of opening up, drawing his attention to the fact that something happened without putting him on the defensive with that uh-oh, and then asking what happened, because the 4-year-old may have done something to prompt him. We may have missed that. So I think in those moments, we are reactive. You probably are going into mama bear mode. I know I do as well. And I think it can be really valuable to stop, slow things down by asking that question like, hey, what's going on? Or what do you need? That gives our child too, here, child's still 8, he's young, gives him some space to reflect and notice what he needs, because he's just reacting to that desire or that need or that feeling, right? And he's reacting physically, which a lot of kids do because they're not aware of their needs and they're not really skilled at asking on how to get their needs met. So, and I can't find that person's response to that. Okay, I think Jeanette said, my gut reaction is that something like that is just an outright no. It's hard. The it's hard part would come when the 8-year-old reacts against the consequences. I'm curious to hear Melissa's take on this. Yeah. So I totally think it's important to set limits and boundaries. And I think maybe I would flip-flop this. And I love, Jeanette, that you're thinking about not just using empathy, but also setting limits. So I might flip-flop this and start with the empathy. So that way our child doesn't disconnect from us. Like, uh-oh, what's going on? And then once we see what's going on or we figure out what really happened, we can say, you know what, it's okay to be frustrated with your little sister. It's not okay to go over and push her over, right? So we can acknowledge the feeling or the need or the desire. We can set a limit on the behavior. And then maybe there's a consequence. You brought up a consequence. That may or may not be appropriate in every situation. So hopefully you have a toolbox of responses obviously in addition to empathy. So I do think the no, and I might not start with no, I might talk about specifically what it is that's not appropriate or goes against our family rules or values. But that's a longer conversation. So that's just kind of giving you some ideas of how to respond after you use empathy. Okay, let's see. Chiquita, Sarah, I hope I answered that question for you and I gave you enough feedback around that challenge. Hopefully you're still here. Let's see. Yeah. And you know what, one thing that I noticed here in what you wrote is you wrote, usually I totally overreact. And the goal here in using empathy is not to react, but to respond. So even if that one-liner doesn't really work for our kids, it can still be a cue to you to gut check your emotional state and calm your body down. Because when we're reactive, we don't have access to our rational brain. We don't say things that make sense. We are irrational, and we do things or say things that are not helpful. So I think even if using this one-liner helps you to get a little bit grounded, whether it's taking a deep breath or leaving the room and coming back, whatever you need to do to be calm and present so you can be responsive versus reactive. I think that's a big piece of the challenge here, because we are wired to react, right? So I think that's a big piece. Thanks. I'll try to work with him to figure out how to make it. Would it be helpful to kind of role play this? Absolutely. I think role playing it is a great idea. I think after something like this happens, you can do some problem solving. I'm so ahead of myself. You can do some problem solving on what else could you have done or said if your brother took your toy or gave you that look or whatever it is that they were doing, giving them another idea. Because if we just tell them what they can't do and we don't tell them what they should do, they're going to go back to that behavior because they don't have any other options. So I think then once you come up with an idea together of another way to get that need met or express that emotion, then you go through and role play that process. That way, when it happens again, it's probably going to happen again in like 5 minutes, 30 minutes, then they have something to access, something different than that reactive response they had before. I've been working a lot on calming techniques lately. Some days it's absolutely, right? Like some days you're completely depleted and it's not easy, and that's okay. Like you're human and your kids need to see you're human. So the goal isn't here to be perfect or super mom or dad. It's just trying to be the best parent possible we can be for our kids. And I think when we own that, our kids appreciate it. And I think they go easier on themselves as well, because kids can be really hard on themselves. When they think their parents are perfect, they tend to beat themselves up a little bit. So I think we need to communicate and demonstrate that we are human too. We mess up, we are depleted, and we get to repair, and we get to try again as well. Okay, got a little sidetracked there. Let's see. Okay, I also wanted to respond. Chiquita said, I'm going to work on clarification statements, such as, let me see if I have this right. And I'm hearing that since misunderstand happens often in my household. So I think those are great alternatives to you look or you sound or I'm noticing. I really try to stay away from using I in this empathetic statement, because then it redirects the focus on you, the parent, and not the child. And we really want the child to feel heard and felt. So let me see if I get this right, or you're sounding really frustrated, or it looks like you really wanted that thing, or you look disappointed. So just kind of calling out, it creates some space for them to say, yes, I am, or say, no, I'm not. One of the things that I notice with a lot of parents is they tell their child how they're feeling, what they want. Oh, you really wanted that thing your sister had, or you didn't like that. And many times we're wrong, and we're actually feeling a power struggle because we're telling our child how they feel, or we're telling our child what they need, and they don't appreciate it. Nobody likes to be told how they feel. I don't like to be told how I should feel or how I'm feeling. So just noticing that this response of I'm hearing that, you sound or your look, is a great way, especially to connect with older kids. I was noticing today, a few of you brought up using that uh-oh. And one thing I want to note about the uh-oh is the tone and delivery is really important, because it can sound really sarcastic and condescending. It can be like, uh-oh, well, you know what? We gotta go, right? It can be, or it could be like, oh no, we gotta go, or uh-oh, we gotta go, right? So the way we communicate empathy makes a huge difference. So just noticing, maybe if you're using some of this, what the tone is, what your body language looks like when you're using empathy, that makes a huge difference. Now, I was going to say something else, and I've totally forgotten what I was going to say, but I wanted to make sure I called that out. I also want to make sure I am answering any questions that come up. I just see Trisha and Sarah here. I know it's kind of late. It's actually really late for me. I had to take a nap because I've been feeling sick today, so I can make it here tonight with you. I am going to be varying the times that we meet. I just know that parents on the West Coast, after they put kids to get bed, they have better availability. So if there's a time that works better for you, please let me know. I know somebody was commenting that they thought everybody was showing up in the morning hours Pacific Standard Time, and they were struggling with that. So I really want to make sure I'm showing up when you're showing up. Okay, so once again, the goal here isn't to be perfect. It's just to experiment and try this out and notice how it feels to you and notice your child's reaction. And, you know, nobody's brought this up so far, but I hear this a lot, like, well, what if I'm doing this and my partner in parenting's not? Well, we can't make our partner in parenting do anything, but I think what you'll notice is when you start having success, you're actually modeling that for those around you as well. So your partner will pick that up, and they may say the same one-liner, they may say something different. I've had parents say things like, oh, fiddlesticks, or, you know, their own thing, which is totally fine, or like kind of some families just kind of give a grunt like, ugh. Right? So you've got to figure out what's most natural for you. I know for me, it totally did not feel natural at first. I've been practicing this for almost 13 years now. So I want to acknowledge for some of you, feels totally weird. It makes no sense. And that's totally fine. But I just want to invite you to just try it out. And not just once, but just try it out a handful of times over the next week. Just notice how it's feeling. Notice what it's bringing up for you. Notice the awareness it's bringing to what you're about to say next or what you're about to do next. All of us are born with empathy. Some of us more naturally than others, but empathy is like a muscle. We can work on it and strengthen it. And I'm definitely a much more empathetic person towards my children now than I was 10 years ago. And that's only through practice, and I can't help myself now. When I see other kids in public melting down or frustrated, I can't help but, oh no, like it's just that response that I have now. So it's a habit. And a lot of things that we're talking about, like the self-care and using empathy, these are habits, and we need to practice them, even if they're not natural, for them to become a habit. Screaming and yelling no or don't or stop or don't do that, that's a habit too. That knee-jerk reaction is a habit. That's a really easy habit. It's a bad habit. So we just need to shift those habits. And I think what you'll notice is things tend to feel lighter. You have more energy. Kids are more cooperative. So this week, again, I'm just giving you small, simple little tweaks that you can make that will hopefully make a big difference in the way you parent and the way you connect with your child. So you are welcome, Trisha. So I have been with you for 23 minutes tonight. I see somebody else just popped in. I want to make sure that if you have any questions, I answer it, or if you want any, oh, isn't that funny? It's weird. I'm way more empathetic with my kids in public than I am at home. Well, probably by the time you get home, you are exhausted, and you're probably also, and I'm just guessing, multitasking. You have a lot going on and managing, so it's really hard to be present and empathetic and connecting with our kids. And I would probably agree with you that it's much easier to connect with them in public when our focus is them and not, you know, getting dinner ready, homework done, you know, piano lessons practice, or whatever is going on at home. There's usually a lot going on at home, so it is a little bit more challenging. But I like that you're aware of this. So my challenge to you, Sarah, is to really just notice if you're using it at home and what areas where you could be more empathetic. All right, ladies, and I don't see any dads with us tonight, but I don't want to leave the dads out because they're very important, and I encourage you, if you do have a partner, to bring them to our Facebook Lives and share all of the emails and workouts that I'm sharing with you, because being on the same page is really, really important. And like I said before, we can't make our partners do certain things or be a certain way, but we can influence them through modeling. So just know that the work that you're doing now is definitely going to influence the other parents in your household that are parenting your child. All right, you are welcome, Sarah. Thanks so much for showing up tonight. I know it's late and you all are tired. I'm tired. I need to get to bed. I apologize. I've been a little low energy today. I'm trying to get better. And I look forward to a whole new conversation tomorrow. So as we move through the week, I want you to still work on all of those things that we've talked about. And I want to acknowledge that it's a lot. It's a lot to make all of these changes all at once. I usually, in my private practice, work on 1 or 2 things over the period of a week or 2. And I'm just kind of throwing a lot at you over the week just so you can pick up 1 or 2 nuggets that resonate with you. So no pressure to do everything. Pick and choose what works for you. My job is to create kind of a buffet of ideas and strategies and tools. And your job is to play with it and figure out what works for you, your child, and your family. All right, I am going to sign off for this evening. I will see you tomorrow. I need to double check when we're meeting tomorrow, but I'll make sure it's in the email I send you bright and early tomorrow morning. And I hope you have a fabulous night. If you haven't done your self-care, make sure it gets done before bed tonight, or go to bed if that's your self-care. And I will see you soon. Bye, guys.